سيدنا والعز لنا لإجابته الله 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 الله.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. My name is Rabbi Amin and I am here with you once again on The Light of the Quran. As you know, this is Ramadan. Ramadan is the month of the Quran, but it is also the month of blessings, forgiveness, charity, and hopefully gaining rewards to one day enter Jannah. I hope you all have a wonderful day. As always, please feel free to contact us with any questions, comments, or concerns at nrbtvcanada@gmail.com. I hope you guys have a wonderful time learning. Let's listen to our scholars.
فمحمدنا هو سيدنا والعز لنا لإجابته الله الله الله.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I am back with another episode of Practice of Islam. This time, the topic that I'd like to bring over to my audience is, what does Islam teach about humanity? In fact, what is the concept of human rights in Islam? First of all, I want to remind myself and all of our listeners, Islam, the word Islam originates from the basic root word called silm, which silm means peaceful. So Islam actually means peaceful submission. In fact, Islam means peaceful everything. That's really what that means. And now, what does peaceful submission means? Well, it means, for a start, that you understand that when Islam is put forward as a way of life, it actually is the best way of life. It actually wants to promote goodness in every aspect of your life. What does that mean? It means, for example, Islam protects life. Muslims are not expected to kill anybody for any reason and whatever. It is not a free-for-all religion where somebody who feels aggravated or upset or angry at somebody else can just harm them. You cannot do that. In fact, the Quran says, if you were to deprive one person of their soul, which means if you were to kill one person, you actually would have killed almost like the whole humanity. This is chapter 5, verse number 32. And similarly, it is actually the case that saving one human being is like saving the entire humanity. So such is the emphasis on life in Islam. The second aspect of it is saving the intellect, which means Islam takes very seriously into the concept that a person's intellect should be guarded. Intellect means the ability to think clearly. That is why in Islam, alcohol, drugs, and other things that affect the intellect of a human being are actually completely and utterly prohibited. And the reason is because with that effect on the intellect, a person is not able to think clearly, and a person will make rash decisions. So you see all around us the effects of people who drink alcohol, people who then commit domestic violence, people who then under the effect of drink can cause car accidents, people who then can cause basically very serious harm to others and to themselves indeed. The effects of alcohol on the self, well known. How this affects the human body, how it affects the human mind, how it even affects really the entire structure of human society. So Islam, being the religion of peace, being the religion of one that protects the intellect of the human being, completely against it. Completely and utterly against the idea of consuming anything that affects the mind. And the same really concept applies to the use of drugs. And I'm talking here about the drugs that are recreational, drugs that are harmful. I'm not talking about the medications that are there to help people, such as antibiotics, pain relief, etc. That is not what I mean. I really mean the drugs that people are using for entertainment and for doing other things that are implied as being of fun nature. Also remember that these things can quite easily be assessed medically beyond the religious reasoning. It is not that difficult to look at the long-term effects of some of these things that people are using. And I'm not going to go into the details because that's not the purpose of this conversation. But I strongly urge those of us who think that this is some sort of a fun or entertainment thing and it's a temporary thing. We can use it when we are young. We can use it because we are able to do what we want to do. I strongly recommend that we look into the long-term effects and really even the short-term effects. I have seen personally people who've used drugs, combined drugs, ended up in hospital either dead or very seriously ill. So one should never underestimate the importance of Islam's emphasis on avoiding these things. Number 3, Islam's insistence on guarding the dignity of a human being. Dignity, my brothers and sisters, in Islam is very big. We cannot blame and accuse somebody of a crime that they have not committed, and we cannot therefore accuse people of everything and anything and start advertising it. It's a very serious crime. We sometimes don't realize that when we say things about others, when we say things about others' dignity in particular, when we say things about others which are not proven, or even if they are proven, they're not to be proven in a debate in public. There is a methodology by which Islam deals with accusations, and there's a methodology by which Islam deals with the effects of such accusations. But it's not something that we take on upon ourselves, because Islam, like I said, cares about the dignity of a human being. The fourth aspect of what Islam cares for is the wealth of a human being. Wealth of a human being is guarded. Wealth cannot be taken against the wishes of somebody. Islam is very strict on the concept of personal property also. We cannot enter people's homes without their permission. We cannot peek into other people's rooms without their permission. We cannot open other people's letters without their permission. This is really where Islam is very strict on guarding a person's privacy. Why wealth so much? Again, same idea. There are ways in which people can do interests, for example, right? Interest and taking of interest is completely prohibited in Islam. The idea is the same. You cannot take wealth when you have lent wealth and top it on top of extra to say, I'm giving 100 to you for a year, but when you return, you give me 110. Not allowed in Islam. Not allowed. Because this concept of taking and giving interest has actually destroyed most of the developed world. I won't go into the details, but you can look at some of the effects that this interest-bearing system has had on the world, in particular the developing world. How much the poorer countries end up having to pay the rich countries and the banks in particular for the amount of money that they have taken as a loan, and what they end up doing in the process of trying to return those loans. Same thing happens to a person when they take a loan from a bank or they take a loan from some other organization, and then the effect that it has on them on the long term and the amount of money they have to return. You can imagine the chaos that brings into a person's life. Islam is completely this way of lending. Islam has other ways of lending. Islam has ways of dealing with this method. Islam is not bereft of giving and taking, but Islam works on a very basic principle. You stretch your legs as much as you have your sheets, which means you live within your means. You should be a person who is content with what Allah has given you. You and me should be able to survive with what Allah has given us, and Allah has given us a lot. The Prophet ﷺ, Muhammad, peace be upon him, in a Sahih Hadith said, if you wake up in the morning healthy, with enough food for the day, and with no danger to life, you are the luckiest person in the world. We, unfortunately, as Muslims, sometimes have forgotten that concept, because sometimes when we've lived in a materialist society for so long, we start taking our values from others. We start looking at others to guide us and forget that Islam, Allah, Muhammad, peace be upon him, these have not just given us principles for living as far as our salah is concerned, as far as our fasting, as far as our zakat and hajj is concerned. Islam actually dominates every aspect of a human being's life. Let me give you an example. The way we eat, the way we drink, what we eat, what we drink, where we go, where we do not go, what we can see, what we do not see, what we can listen to, what we should not listen to, what we can touch, what we should not touch, where we can walk to, where we should not walk to. Every aspect of our life is guided by Islam, not forced, guided. I'll give you an example. When people expose themselves to everything and anything in the way of looking, just look at the amount of violence that's coming out of our screens these days. You know what the psychologists are saying? Psychologists are saying that amount of negative news actually harms the heart. It affects a person's ability to think clearly. It makes a person negative. It makes a person depressed. Some of the acts of violence have resulted from watching violence. It's well known that children are subjected to watching violent video games and are subjected to doing things, for example, that change the way they think, because they're little. They don't always think clearly. But even beyond that, if a person was to mix with others who were smoking, if a person was to mix with others who were using bad language, if a person was to mix with people who didn't wash, who basically smelled bad, or who smoked, etc., what would end up happening to that person? That person would start taking the characteristics of the people that he or she mixed with. Islam is therefore very careful about the company you keep. And that is the fifth aspect of what Islam guards. It actually guards your dignity and really your ability to survive, your health. I'm sorry, that's what I meant to say. It guards your health. And your health is guarded because your health is really the way that you're going to survive and live the life and do the things that God wants you to do. Imagine a person who's unhealthy. Imagine a person who is not disciplined. Imagine a person who cannot get up for Fajr Salah. Imagine a person who cannot give his wife her rights. Imagine a person who does not have control on his tongue. Imagine a person who cannot control himself when he's driving the car. What kind of chaos would that person cause in this world? Islam literally guards that person's ability to do bad and encourages to do good. In fact, one of the principles Allah Ta'ala has told us, Kuntum khaira ummatin ukhrijat linnas. Allah Ta'ala has said, I have made you the best of nations. And for what reason? Ya'muruna bil ma'roof, you encourage good, wa yanhauna anil munkar, and you discourage bad. And this really becomes the basis of, if you like, the way we live our lives. Allah Ta'ala has told us, Qul inna salati wa nusuki wa mahyaya wa mamati lillahi rabbil alameen. Say, my salah, my life, my death, and the way I do things is all in accordance with what Allah has told me. Really, my brothers and sisters in Islam, if you consider that as the top reason for doing the way you do your life, you will see that Islam gives more rights to everybody than pretty much any other way of life. Let me give you another example. In this society, and many societies, unfortunately, the abandonment of children is very common. We talk about children's right, we talk about their ability to go to, have an education, we talk about their ability to have good nutrition, we talk about their ability to be peaceful. Absolutely, there's nothing wrong with all of that. They should be there. But what about their ability to recognize that God has put them on this earth for a purpose? Who tells them that? If I, as a Muslim father, ignore my children's basic rights to learn about Islam, actually that is more bereft of God's guidance than anything else I can do. Allah Ta'ala will ask a father, what did you do to bring these children up as Muslims? That actually is a question that a father will have to answer. Allah Ta'ala has said in Surah Tahrim, Ya ayyuhalladhina, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, qu anfusakum wa ahlikum nara. وَقُودُهَا النَّاسُ وَالْحِجَارَةُ عَلَيْهَا مَلَائِكَةٌ غِلَاظٌ شِدَادٌ لَا يَعْصُونَ اللَّهَ مَا أَمَرَهُمْ وَيَفْعَلُونَ مَا يُؤْمَرُونَ. Just to make it short, Allah Ta'ala has said, protect yourself, O people, O believers, against the fire of what will affect your family and yourself. So that means, and this is the verse is addressing Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. So people with belief, Allah is not addressing people with no belief. Allah is addressing people with belief to say you are still at the risk of losing your family and yourself to the fire of hell if you're not careful. So what carefulness means is, I have to make sure as a father that I give those values of Islam to my children. I cannot hand my children over to somebody to say, oh, he can do to a Maulana, or he can go to a person of knowledge, but I don't have any responsibility to my children. No, no. My children are my responsibility. If I don't give them that right, then I've deprived them every other right. If you didn't give them food, if you didn't give them drink, if you didn't give them a home, definitely you're going to be accountable. But if you didn't give them Islam, if you didn't give them the purpose of their life, if you didn't make them realize this is the reason why Allah has created them, to be Muslims, to be obedient to God's laws, and to become people that are a source of rahmah, mercy and love to those around them, then you and me would have become very big losers. The same applies when it comes to rights of our non-Muslims, our non-Muslim neighbors, our non-Muslim co-workers, our non-Muslim other people who are friendly to us. They all have a right to know the truth of Islam from us. They should see in us upright human beings that are actually virtuous people, that tell the truth, that come to work at time, that are disciplined in their belief, that are guarded in their language, that are careful in what they put in their stomachs, that are healthy individuals, that are a source of khair to the community, of goodness to the community. In what way? By taking part in public campaigns of doing good, cleaning your streets, taking care of drugs in your society, doing your very best to avoid harming people, promoting the good values, taking your time to introduce Islam and Islamic values to people who are not Muslims, and sometimes to people who are Muslims but are not confident Muslims because they've not been introduced to Islam. They've seen a version of Islam from the media. They've seen a version of Islam from their father who was not practicing, or a mother who was not practicing, or they were practicing but were partially practicing and doing a lot of things that were in fact completely anathema to Islam. Sometimes people think I can just be a good Muslim when it comes to namaz, salah, to fasting, to giving zakat, but I can be a horrible husband, I can be a bad neighbor, I can be a poor father. That's not how Islam works. Islam is a total package. When it talks about human rights, it talks about the rights of a person to be obedient to God. Let me give you one more example. Taking care of our elderly parents, in particularly, taking care of our parents. In this society, unfortunately, like many other societies, the elderly are ignored. They are not really taken care of. People think they are a burden. People think they are a nuisance value, etc., etc. Islam actually gives them the highest position right next to the name of God. The Quran says, وَبِالْ وَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا, and be with your parents excellent, excellent. I don't want to go into the details, but excellent really means they should not feel at all anything but the best of treatment from their children. May Allah Ta'ala make us people who realize that human rights are given in Islam like no other way of life is, and that this religion promotes the best ways in which the most peaceful societies can result all over the world. I ask God to make us people like that so that we become example for others and we become better and highly regarded and well-practicing decent human beings. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
فمحمدنا هو سيدنا والعز لنا لإجابته الله.